Hello and welcome to Liz at Home and another Watercolor Wednesday. Today, because of autumn and Halloween coming along, I've decided to paint a very simple little pumpkin, and I hope that you enjoy watching and possibly trying to do it yourselves. I've drawn the pumpkin very simply, and I'm going to talk you through how I painted it. So I've erased most of the pumpkin so that the watercolor can go on top of it, and I start by putting a light wash using some quinacridone gold. I'm using that as Daniel Smith quinacridone gold, and I'm just doing a light wash of that over the entire pumpkin. And then I want to use a slightly darker color to define the different sort of segments that the pumpkin has, and for doing that I'm using a Winsor & Newton Indian red, and the paint was still quite wet while I did that, and this Indian red is quite a staining color, so I had hoped to be able to move the paint out a bit, but it didn't actually move. So as you can see, we've got the segments quite nicely there, and now I'm going to try and do a leaf and a little curly vine type shape, and I just work quite quickly. I'm using my black silver brush and black velvet silver brush, which I absolutely love because it's got the most divine point. And I'm using a sap green, and then I'm using different greens around the edges. So in that case I actually used Cascade green, which was quite nice, and then I used a grey, a Payne's grey for the one leaf, and dropped some green in there. I was just basically having fun and sort of drawing with my paintbrush, and then I was using a green gold for that leaf, just wanting to play with leaves and dropping different colors in there. I dropped quinacridone gold into there, not orange, hoping that it wouldn't turn too browny, but my thought was that I didn't really mind, because the fact of the matter is that the leaves are turning, so they would go brown. And I want to now work a little bit and get some shading onto the pumpkin so that I could make it look more 3D. So I'm going around again, and this time I'm using a raw umber as I go around the segments, and I wanted to sort of try and wet my brush and then draw that in, and the paint just sat there. It wouldn't actually move, so I wasn't quite sure what to do. I fiddled around for a little bit, and some of it moved a bit. I tried using it, and then I decided I was turning the poor pumpkin too brown, so I decided to just allow it to sit there and dry, and then I decided I'd come back. So now, after allowing it to dry completely, I wet the entire pumpkin again with clean water and a damp brush, and I go over everything because I wanted to get a softer blend from the segments. So that is something that you can do if you find yourself in trouble and that things have not actually blended as well as you wanted them to. Okay, so now everything is nicely damp but not sopping wet, and I'm using some Winsor & Newton sepia, and I'm just going to, I wanted to darken that central area to make it recede a little bit, and then I wanted to darken the bottom of the pumpkin and a bit of the top, and just allow that to bleed up into the pumpkin a bit. And then I also want to make the pumpkin slightly more orange, so I'm doing this first and then using the orange. This is a very bright orange. It's a Van Gogh Pearl orange. So as you can see, I'm using all various different paints that I have, and I painted over the entire pumpkin again with this Pyrrole orange, but allowing that sepia to bleed into the orange so that it's a soft blend there, and I much prefer this color. The other one was looking quite wishy. So I like that very much. And then I also decided that I want some highlights. So I'm rinsing my brush really clean and then drying it off and just, as you can see, sweeping it over the middle section of each segment, rinsing, drying off, sweeping. And that is lifting some of the color, so it lifts just an area to be a highlight. And that has worked quite well because everything is damp. The edges are going to be nice and soft. And so I was quite happy with that. But then the dark lower area and the segments are now not quite like I wanted them. So I'm using, once again, the sepia, but this is now moving and bleeding in a little bit more. And I'm just playing around a bit and playing. As you can see, my pumpkin that I've drawn is slightly wonky on the one side, but it really didn't bother me because fruits and vegetables are not perfect. They grow in all shapes and sizes, and so I quite like my pumpkin. I think he turned out quite nicely. And now I'm just dropping in. I'm not actually painting. I'm not using the brush. I'm not using strokes. I'm sort of dotting in the color so that it can bleed a little bit. And then I'm just letting that travel down by using a bit of a brush stroke and sort of encouraging it to move into the damp area. And where the blend's not quite the way I want it, I rinse the brush and dry it off on the paper towel and then sort of encourage it and move it around. I hope that you can see what I'm doing because that's the way I do it. And now I just want to ground the pumpkin, so just wet my brush. There's no paint on it, it's clean water, and it's picking up from the color of the pumpkin and just creating a bit of ground, and so that it's actually sitting on something. And again, this sepia keeps sort of almost disappearing, but that's the way I'm dealing with it, dropping it in. I think it could be a little bit too watery, but I'm sort of just playing and letting it sort itself out. And then bringing some shape to the top again and darkening that. Just encouraging it up a little bit more. And now that's bleeding down a bit, so I'm once again rinsed my brush and dried it off and making some more of the ground there. And I'm quite pleased with how our pumpkin turned out. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please drop me a comment and give us a like. And I hope that you'll join me again next Wednesday for another Watercolor Wednesday. Thank you and have a great week. Bye-bye now.